I come to you with a warning. Beware the indifference of the Chinese. Now, I have a reason for saying this, guys. We're talking about cross-cultural relationships here. And this is maybe something that could help a bunch of you guys understand what's going on if you have any kind of interaction with Chinese people, or if you have a Chinese girlfriend or wife or boyfriend or husband or whatever it is. We have to talk about respect, and we have to talk about respect of different cultures here. Now, when I moved to China, I found out very quickly that it's the Chinese way or the highway. When you're in China, you have to respect the traditions there. You have to respect the different customs and the different holidays. And, you know, there are all sorts of things that you could do which might upset Chinese people because they're, for the most part, quite superstitious. Certain numbers are seen as very bad luck. Certain gifts you shouldn't give because it's insulting, or very bad luck, that kind of thing. There's a lot of things you have to watch out for. And when it comes to certain traditions, especially if you're going to get married, for instance, you have to do things like the tea ceremony with the parents. If you don't do this, it's seen as a huge insult in southern China, most of China actually. So you got to do the tea ceremony. You have to pay a bride price in many situations. In fact, a lot of my foreign friends, I didn't have to, but a lot of my foreign friends had to pay a substantial sum of money to the parents-in-law. It's kind of a part of the tradition to buy the daughter. And this is something that Chinese guys have to go through as well. It's pretty devastating. It's not fun. So you have to pay a bride price. You have to have a big banquet. You know, there's all sorts of things surrounding marriage that you have to stick to. And if you don't want to do those kind of things, you're going to lose face for the whole family. The family's probably going to do their best to jeopardize the wedding and put a stop to it, put immense amounts of pressure on their daughter or their son. So, you know, you kind of have to follow all these different traditions. You've got the Chinese New Year festival where you have to go have all these meals with family and give out lucky money, and you have to do that. If you don't give out lucky money, you're seen as not a part of the family and things like that. So there are all these traditions you have to follow. Now I could just keep rattling off all these things, grave sweeping day, whatever, and all these different things that we have to observe as foreigners when we're in China. And, you know, I actually have no problem with that. I think it's good to show respect to another culture, respect to other people. But the door only swings one way. It doesn't swing the other way. The idea of accepting foreign traditions, foreign ideas, even things like foreign food, it's kind of like no in China. And in fact, not only in China. If you go overseas, you'll see the insular communities, the Chinatowns. They're there for a reason. Chinese people will go there, speak only Chinese, only go buy vegetables at the Chinese supermarkets, Asian supermarkets, cook Chinese food only. They probably never had a pizza in their life, even if they're living in New York, that kind of thing. Of course, the younger generation is slightly different, but, you know, I'm talking in generalities here. So what I'm getting at here is that the idea of accepting foreign ideas and foreign culture is so against the Chinese way that they don't even do it when they're living in a foreign culture. In fact, some of the doctors I used to train would even take their own rice and oil from China when they went to go study in Germany and Australia because they were worried that they wouldn't be able to find food over there that would suit their Chinese bodies. And this is where it comes down to the 5,000 years of history. You see, Chinese people are taught their entire lives that China is the height of civilization. The Chinese civilization is the most civilized. We've got 5,000 years of history. You know, Chinese people are superior. It's the center of the universe. Zhongguo, the name of the country, means Middle Kingdom. And so when you grow up believing in this sort of national superiority, and in fact, I know a lot of Chinese people have a very sort of a racial superiority thing going on. It's really a thing. They believe that the Chinese race, the Chinese civilization is like the best in the world. This 5,000 years of history thing, by the way, is a bunch of bollocks. It's definitely not true. In fact, modern China is only about 70 years of history. They destroyed all the other stuff, like during the cultural devolution and the Great Leap Backwards. But never mind that. If you look into it a little bit more, China as it stands as a country hasn't been like this for very long. It was a bunch of warring states, a bunch of different countries before. and different races, and you know, you had the Mongolians and you had the this and the that. It's all a bunch of nonsense. It's kind of like saying that Australia is the Roman Empire. You can't do that. China really doesn't have a very long history, and even this claim of 5,000 years of history has been debunked through other means too. So anyway, there's no proof of that. It's a bunch of nonsense. And certainly if you had 5,000 years of history, you wouldn't be spitting on the street and defecating on the street and stuff like that, because that's not what a civilization does. So, that little rant over. When you deal with people that are of the belief that their culture and their race are the number one, supreme, top of the line, you know, they obviously will be less accepting of foreign ideas and foreign beliefs. So, how does this relate to you and me? Well, sadly, I've seen this happen a few times when it comes to things like Christmas. Now, here in the Western world, people are so accepting of other cultures that in fact it's gotten to the point where you can't even write Merry Christmas on your cards anymore because you might offend somebody who doesn't celebrate Christmas. That's a bunch of bollocks, by the way. Completely against that. If I wish somebody a Merry Christmas, if they don't celebrate Christmas, that's fine. They can take my well wishes or they can just bugger off. One of the two. It's A or B, you know. But what I'm saying is we're very accepting of different cultures, but we tend to forget that other cultures aren't very accepting of other cultures. It's true. I've grown up in Africa and lived in China. And trust me when I say this, when it comes to accepting other cultures, the Western world is number one in the world. Other places, they really don't give too much of a shit. They'll be like, oh, that's fun, that's interesting, whatever, go do your own thing. You know what I mean? So, back to the point here. There's been a couple of fairly devastating situations with some of my friends who have Chinese wives or Chinese husbands, and Christmas rolls around and their spouses are pretty indifferent. They don't really seem to understand how important a holiday like Christmas is to people who are from a sort of a Christian or Western society. You know, myself personally, I'm not very religious, but I still love the tradition of Christmas and everything surrounding it, the Christmas spirit, the way everybody seems to kind of have a cheerful, happy, joyous time, and you know, there's a lot of goodwill amongst men and all those cliches, and you know, the whole tree and the presents and the stockings, and you know, there's a lot about Christmas that I absolutely love. And so I think it's incredibly important to me, and a lot of people I know obviously think it's very important, but their Chinese wives and Chinese spouses and girlfriends and whatever don't really seem to think it's anything other than another day. And so this indifference can be very hurtful, and it has been to some close friends of mine. Recently we've been chatting about it, because whenever there's a Chinese festival that comes around, we're expected to drop on our hands and knees and make sure everything's perfect, everything's lined up so that, you know, the Chinese festival is properly celebrated. We have to have the right kinds of food, and we have to have the right kinds of things going on, and, you know, lots of resources and time and effort have to be put into making sure that the Chinese festival is properly observed. But when it comes to Western festivals, the Chinese spouses and friends and so on just don't seem to care as much. So what can we do about this? Very simple. Remember, most Chinese people will be looking at things through a Chinese lens. Of course they are. They're Chinese. Just like I get accused all the time in my videos of looking at China through a Western lens. What do you expect? I'm Western, of course I'm going to look at things through a Western lens. You know, that's kind of stupid to say something like that. But it made me realize something. Although I do look at things through a Western lens, I can put myself in the shoes of a Chinese person, and I can understand the way they feel, and I can understand what they see, and why it is they believe what they believe. But I have never met a Chinese person, no joke, never once met a Chinese person who could put themselves in the shoes of a Westerner and see things through a Western lens. Other than obviously, you know, Chinese people that grew up in the West. You know, that's an exception. But Chinese people in China, they see everything from a Chinese point of view, and it's not really possible for them to think outside the box and look at things from your side. So you just kind of have to hammer it down and make sure that they understand how important certain things are to you. Try to introduce and force, just like you get forced to eat chicken feet and things like that all the bloody time, force them to try different kinds of foods, you know, and force them to understand your culture. It's important because if you're going to have a relationship or you're going to be married, there has to be mutual respect. And when you start to see that the respect is coming from pretty much only one side, when it comes to things like holidays and traditions, I'm not talking about general respect, you're going to become very upset in the end. So guys, I hope that this video has helped you understand China just that little bit more. That's why I make my videos after all. Can't wait to see you in the next one. And until then, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome. And don't forget, we have all these cool things going on, like Lau86's videos on Wednesday. We got ADVChina on Monday, the most important one. And of course, Friday, catch me for another one, just in time for a beer.